So, hey everybody, my name is Damon Lewis. My co-host Andrew Fritz, and today we have a special guest, Rahgi Abaza. And I met Rahgi when I was doing a Google search for different meetup groups for astral projection. And I actually, that's part of trying to find community and trying to find people. So I forget how long ago, maybe it was like a year ago. Raggy and I started texting each other and kind of getting to know each other a little bit, and wanted to bring him on the show and talk to him. So welcome.
Yeah, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Absolutely.
Cool. So I wanted to open it up with the first question. Can you give kind of a timeline of when you started practicing astral projection or your different whatever your meditation practice, and kind of give us a little bit of bullet points and a timeline until now. What's your practice with now, and do you have any sort of highlights or epiphanies along that journey?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, it all started basically when I was around 14, I would say. I had an experience, what most people would call an OBE or an astral projection. At that time, I didn't know what it was at all. I just had experienced the sensation of my body vibrating pretty vigorously around like 3 a.m., but I couldn't move my muscles. So I couldn't move my body, but I started to feel this vibration kind of sense through it. And after a while, that kept happening over and over again. And I remember I finally one day, the same thing happened. It always happens at 3 a.m. And I feel the vibration coming again. I'm woken up, but I can't move my body. But I start to feel this vibration. And I remember that night, I slipped out of my body. I felt myself literally getting up as I normally would, just to get up, exactly how I would physically. But I was just slipping out of my body, and I could walk around the room and I could look at myself sleeping there, and I remember going down to the kitchen. I heard pots and pans in the kitchen as if my mom was making some kind of uh, dinner or something. And I remember going down and being able to feel the texture of the pots and pans so vis- uh, viscerally, so tangibly, and it was just such an astounding experience. In fact, I got so excited that I woke up out of it, and then
Yeah.
next, just. So that was around 14 years old. As I started to learn more and more, I started to get into Carlos Castaneda and the teachings of Don Juan. Um, I started learning a lot through those books, and it eventually compelled me to want to meet shamans and meet. That's my friend Dan.
Cool.
Meet to meet shamans in the Amazon. And so I went to Peru around when I was 20 to meet with shamans there and learn a little bit about the medicine because I was so inspired by the teachings of Don Juan by Carlos Castaneda. Um, and after that, the practice started to shift a little bit, and I came back from Peru and I started to venture into learning the Yang style Tai Chi from the original Yang family. And that was a pivotal experience for me in refining the practice and understanding the context of how shamanism functions without the use of psychotropic plants that are commonly used, like ayahuasca and peyote and psychotropic substances that I think many people would say in the indigenous cultures of shamanism use in many respects to enter into altered states of consciousness. So learning the Eastern Taoist methods allowed me to integrate the Toltec methods with the Taoist methods. And it was through the Toltecs and the Taoists that I was able to fully integrate and understand the system of astral projection. And that's where my practice has been now and how it's evolved.
That's could you share some of your story? You said you're around 20 years old and you went to Peru to what was that like? Going there and what'd you experience there or learn there, and what was that like? That sounds intriguing.
Oh, in Peru.
Yeah.
Yeah, in Peru, that was an incredible experience. I went to learn with some ayahuasca shamans. They're called ayahuasqueros in Spanish, and very deep experience. You know, what's interesting about ayahuasca is that it is a combination of dimethyltryptamine and a monoamine oxidase inhibitor. So the DMT that you get from the leaves, the chacruna leaves, which is Psychotria viridis, combined with this monoamine oxidase inhibitor together, allow the DMT to stay in the synapse longer. That's why it's like people say ayahuasca, you have like a 4-hour experience versus DMT is like a 15-minute experience. For people who, heard about using psychedelics as plant teachers. So, I say ayahuasca is not really a psychedelic. So, many people have different opinions, but essentially it allows you to experience DMT in your brain from an outside source. So that outside source, many people would say on a spiritual level, could be the ayahuasca spirit, or pharmacologically, you might say, it's releasing DMT into the synapse, and your pineal gland is perceiving, based on that pharmacological interaction as a neurotransmitter. There's a lot of research actually into DMT that shows that it's released directly into the cerebrospinal fluid. So we produce DMT naturally. And we produce DMT basically at 3 times in our lives, usually when we are about to die, in the process of dying, when we're born, and also a little bit when we're sleeping, a little bit. I think that varies depending on somebody's practice. And I think that, when you look into the pharmacological structure of DMT, it's very similar to 2 other structures, neurotransmitters that are in your brain, which are melatonin and serotonin. So serotonin makes you feel really calm and good. And melatonin people associate with, I want to get to sleep. I want to dream. I want to have melatonin. So serotonin is that initial phase of feeling good, that meditative phase, that I love it because it has that name in it, serenity. Serotonin, serenity. It's very serene. And then after that serenity comes that dipping your toes into the water of dreams a little bit, hypnagogic phenomenon. That's the melatonin coming in. But I believe that once the serotonin converts into melatonin, because again, they're very similar in structure, you have serotonin converting into melatonin, and melatonin then converting into DMT. And then you go from, I feel serene, to, I'm starting to dream, to, I am realizing I'm dreaming. I'm having these very vivid experiences. And then the varying depths of vividness are what I would say are the varying concentrations endogenously of DMT in your brain. So how do you get DMT in your brain? Well, you get more serotonin, because with more serotonin is more melatonin. With more melatonin is more DMT. So then how do you get more serotonin in your brain? And then of course there's studies on meditation that show meditation increases the amount of serotonin production in the brain. And like I said, understanding of the Taoist practice, it's really that fundamental understanding of how qi works with your system. And I think there's really more research that should be done into how I have this theory that the qi that you absorb creates dreams. You know, if you think about it, I hope I'm not overstepping on this question. I think
No, this is great. Good.
This is
No,
great.
it's cool, man.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. So if you think about it, like when you sit down to sleep, what's happening? You're actually meditating, but you're doing it passively. You're doing it because you have to. Everybody is doing two things. Number one, their spine is completely straight when they're sleeping, usually, unless you want a bad night's sleep. So you have that posture of your spine being straight when you want to go to sleep. And the other thing is your spine isn't moving at all when you're going to sleep. Now, those two conditions of your spine create a situation in which literally you're going to start having visions coming out of your brain, like what? You know what I mean? So all of a sudden, if we tap into the spine, if we realize and recreate the conditions of sleep by manipulating the spine, what are those two conditions? Again, having the spine being completely at the vertex, vertical, and completely still, completely motionless. So a lot, and the Taoists would say, you're finding stillness in motion and motion in stillness. So what happens is then you start to absorb energy. So you start to absorb energy, and then if you're sleeping, that energy manifests itself as I start to dream. So if you're not having those conditions when you're trying to sleep, you don't dream as well because you're not getting enough energy, because that energy is translating into dream-like phenomenon. So when you realize the relationship of the influx of energy into your body and the quality of the vividness of your mind's eyes seeing and dreaming and all of that, when you see that there's a relationship there, a direct relationship, then you realize the more energy I learn how to absorb, the better I will be at being able to alter my consciousness naturally and recreate dreams whenever I want, instead of just waiting to go to sleep to have to experience your mind's eye's vision. So it's your mind's eye is like a car, or it needs fuel constantly, you know. And so if you run out of the influx of energy, then you run out of the fuel of your energy body.
So, so what is your practice now, and how are you able to control the level of your energy? How are you doing it?
Yeah, so for me, right now, I start with pretty much 5 stages. The first stage being Neigong. Neigong means internal energy. It's completely passive. It has no physical movement. It's the manipulation of your mind to command awareness through your body, through what you might say are the acupuncture meridians, through the channels, the organ channels that go through your body mentally, and start to open them up without even physically moving. That's the first stage. And that starts the process of energy cultivation. Then the next stage is Qigong. So,
Wait, hold on. I just wanna make sure to clarify. So how do you open up your energy meridians? Is it through will? Is it through breathing? What's the process of opening up the channels for the
definitely through will.
Okay.
Breathing is less emphasized, but it's still important. Will is emphasized to be the most important over even breathing, because will eventually controls breathing. So will moves the energy, will commands the energy. In Chinese, will could be the character would be yi, meaning the mind's will and intent to control and direct energy and chi throughout the body. So E means you can, wherever the mind goes, the chi will follow. So it's that will to direct and move mentally energy through the circuits of your body. And there's a couple of circuits like the microcosmic orbit that runs through the posterior aspect of your spine all the way down the midline to the anterior aspect of your spine. And all along your body, every crevice, there are these entryways, these points of, or these channels of energy that sort of can be thought of as kind of like wells where you collect energy. And so it's that fundamental practice that compromises that first stage that I was mentioning.
And do you have a time of day that you're doing it? Like, are you laying down for bed? Are you like walk us through step by step if you're preparing yourself to get ready to project?
Oh yeah. So for astral projection, are you asking?
Yeah, for astral projection.
Yeah.
Try
Okay.
to walk us through
My,
from if you're laying down, if you're going to sleep.
yeah. So my astral projection method is different than Neigong. Neigong
Okay.
is sort of a greater, broader category. Astral projection would fall into Neigong.
Okay.
So astral projection, my method is as I fall asleep, I concentrate on all these points. And some of them need to be tonified. So I think you think about it like a small wheel. Each point is like a little wheel that can be turned. You can turn it on mentally, or you can drain it out and turn it so either clockwise, turning it to the right, turns it on more, versus turning it to the left, drains it out more. So as I'm asleep, as I'm laying down at least, I focus on each little point and I activate each one mentally. And I do two things. First, I absorb energy there, and then I also relax and completely paralyze myself. So the idea is to be able to do two things: paralyze my entire body prematurely before the normal mechanism of REM sleep paralysis is supposed to take place. I have to be able to do that myself through each little point. And number two, absorb energy in each little point at the same time. So it's not just paralysis, it's also the absorption of energy. Because not only do I have to prematurely paralyze my body, I have to prematurely gain a surplus of dream energy. If I have the normal dream energy that everyone might have, which is I don't try to do any of this, I just go to sleep, then I wake up and I feel fine, but I don't have enough energy to astral project. If I have half that much, then I wake up with a terrible night's sleep, and it has a lot of health consequences, sleep deprivation. So it's about not going about, you have to go above and beyond to be able to handle these the consistent astral projections, because otherwise you'll be depleted. So you have to have a system of qigong, sleeping, at least for me. This is my process, at least. My process is to develop my energy cultivation as I sleep so much that I have a surplus of it. So my body's good. I got the normal amount that I need for sleep. I actually have more than I need, more than my body needs. So my physical body is good. It's already got what it needs. My energy body inside then can benefit, because it still needs even more for it to be lucid and vivid and awake. So two things: completely paralyze myself. I like to think about like an energy blanket that paralyzes me. So the energy blanket, why energy blanket? Why not just a normal blanket? Because the energy blanket is you're absorbing energy as it's paralyzing you. And as you do that, as you fall asleep, if you're consistent with it, you're going to find, even if you don't astral project, your dreams will be more vivid, because you're pulling in that dream energy, that consciousness. That energy is what creates dreams in the first place.
So when you talk about Yeah, I've experienced sleep paralysis before, but it was more of a spontaneous thing. Um, so is it more of like having the intent of allowing your body to fall asleep, or is there something specific you're doing with getting intentionally paralyzing the body, like going directly into sleep paralysis? Is there something specific with that?
Well, I like to distinguish here. There's different types of hypnagogic states. There's sleep paralysis, where you can't move your body.
Okay.
Many people have a very fearful experience with sleep paralysis, where
Yeah.
they have a weight on their chest. They feel an entity there. They see a black shadowy figure. Even if you do a wiki search on sleep paralysis, there's usually a black man on a like a shadow person. I'm saying in a
Yeah.
tall, the top hat, and it's you just like it's so that's one form of sleep paralysis. But I guess I don't call it another form of sleep paralysis. I would say that what I was describing with my experience when I was 14 wasn't a sleep paralysis in so much as it wasn't anything negative around there.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't any sort of negative entity around there. It was just that I couldn't move my body.
Right.
So I guess that's a different form of sleep paralysis. And with that, I actually get vibrations. So sleep paralysis, I don't always get vibrations. If sleep paralysis, you can just be paralyzed and you have an entity there. But with astral projection paralysis, you're paralyzed, but you start to feel your body vibrating also.
Right.
Because it's your inner astral body within phase shifting out.
Right. And is there something specific that so I'm sure people that maybe practice kind of that mind awake, body asleep, even I've experienced it where you can sit there forever sometimes, and it seems like you can get into like a light paralysis kind of, where like the legs and arms are kind of, tingling, or just kind of feeling like they're, less sensation there perhaps. But it doesn't go all the way. Do you sense that you have to go all the way, or if you do, like what do you think it takes to get to the whole?
Yeah. So the problem with mind awake, body asleep. I'm so glad you brought that up.
Okay.
Because I say this all the time. The problem with mind awake, body asleep is you're approaching it from the idea that I'm supposed to project right away. Mind awake, okay. Mind awake. Body asleep, okay. That part's good. Body asleep, but mind awake is like I'm just trying to project the energy out, and as I'm falling asleep, project it out. Mind awake. And then eventually, what happens? You just fall asleep. Why does that happen? Because you're so focused on projecting it out that you get depleted and you get tired, and then you can't have any dream attention. The opposite should be done. Instead of trying to project it out right away, first you store it. First you bring it into the body, the energy, and you have a surplus. And then you're not going to be so tired. You're actually, like I said, you're going to have enough energy to be able to be lucid. And it's going to feel like you're more nourished, kind of rejuvenated also in the process too. Instead of mind awake, body asleep, and then I don't have a good night's sleep either. It's like a lose-lose situation in a way. This is like a win-win, because even if you don't astral project, you get more energy, you get more vividness of your dreams. So it is really a win-win. So you got to approach it from, first I absorb the raw energy like clay, You got to have something to mold with. Your mind needs something to mold with, like clay. That energy, the more energy you have, the more clay you have to work with. And then with that clay, you mold these dimensions.
Yeah, I actually just had an experience that was similar to what you're talking about, just like night or two ago, where I'm driving and I'm getting tired. And so like obviously melatonin, right? Trying to make me tired. And I was gonna stop, at the nearest rest stop to sleep for a little bit. And I did a breathing exercise while I'm driving. And I'm breathing in and I'm thinking about chi and I'm trying to wake myself up by breathing. And it's working. I'm getting myself more awake and more awake. But that melatonin's still up there. The melatonin still wants me to sleep. But now I'm invigorated and I feel more energetic. And so lo and behold, when I took a nap, went to sleep for 30 minutes, had a like lucid dream, out of body. Like it's mine are kind of like at this point a little bit of both. Like the floating flying dreams, you know, the floating flying lucid dreams.
Yeah. 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 Actually, no, I'm not familiar specifically with that term, like as you're using it.
Well, the lucid dreaming and astral projection have a lot of similarities
Right.
in the sense that you can be outside of your body. You can your energy, your astral body can be outside, but you might not be aware that you're projecting. You might be
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
having,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, having a
There is
lucid dream out of your body.
totally, totally. I see. I have either those two types. Either I'm awake because I was in a dream and I became awake,
Mhm.
or because all of a sudden I know I'm in my bed, I start vibrating, and then I leave directly from there. And that's when it's more vivid. Usually, it's a more intense astral projection. But it, even if you start from a normal dream, it can progress to increased vividness. Now, I want to bring something incredible up because lately I've been taking it to a whole nother level where not only do I get to the point where I've astral projected and I'm in the astral projection, but then I start to do Tai Chi with my astral body and Qigong in the astral projection, and it literally sustains me there.
Cool.
So I can't stress enough how important it is to absorb energy continuously once you've already been able to leave your body and you're out of your body if you want to sustain it. And that's why mind awake body asleep, even if you are successful with that technique, can only get you so far once you're out, because it doesn't teach you, well, how do you absorb after that? How do you absorb energy into your energy body directly?
Yeah, when I've been out or lucid dreaming, either one, I've done velo techniques outside of the body to raise my energy, raise my awareness, get the, like lucidity now, clarity now. I'll just do a velo and get clarity that way, or so same thing.
Yeah, exactly. And the mechanism, it might have a different name, but the mechanism is so, essentially the same.
Mhm.
So
Um, so can you share maybe some of some of your experience, like out of body experiences, maybe kind of how they started and maybe what they're kind of just how you talked about you're kind of taking a next level and doing that Tai Chi
yeah,
out of the body. What's that look like for you?
it's okay. I mean, the experience that I get when I have different types of projections. I have the ability to project even right now as we're talking to some degree, but it's not as vivid as an astral projection that I would have if it was 3 a.m. and my physical body was completely paralyzed.
Mm-hmm.
But it can get closer and closer towards that. So I have those experiences. But I want to talk about specifically the most intense ones that are whenever at 3 a.m. and I can't move my body. So with that it's probably one of the most ecstatic feelings I've ever had in my entire life. I mean, every time, even if it's a dark type of astral projection, which I'll go into,
Mm-hmm.
it's just so pivotal in my it shatters your conception of life after death every time. You're just brought back to like the awe of like, wow, you know you're it's really, there's so much more than I even thought exists, to this world. That's always the first thing I have. um, so usually when I was, depending on where I've lived and over the periods of my life, is where obviously the projection will start. Usually, and in the past, it was always in my old home, my old room, because even if I was living in Boston, it would always be my home in New York.
Mm-hmm.
Lately, now though, it's gotten more vivid to the point where I know where I am now and I'm there. But sometimes it would be kind of this interesting thing where it's like you go back to what you know, and it's like that first room that I had.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it'll always be that. A lot of those projections, it was I'm in my room, um, I or I'm having a dream, and then all of a sudden the dream stops entirely, and I know for a fact that I just stopped dreaming, and that now I'm in my bed, and now I can't move my body. And now I'm getting this like cold shiver down my spine that's turning into this vigorous vibration. And then through that, it like feels like it's like tickling me almost, and it's like almost uncomfortable. It's actually very uncomfortable. and then you literally just through that, there's this like so much pressure that just wants to be released because it's so uncomfortable. It's like that, and then it's like something like kind of pops out, and then all of a sudden, oh my god, I'm literally left out of my body, and I'm in the room, and I usually don't like to look at myself at all because that might bring me back into my body. So I try to get as far away as possible from myself. I go right to the window, and I go right through the window. Sometimes I go down through the house and then out of the front door, but usually it's just right through the window, out into the backyard. And then the backyard looks similar, but there's features of it that aren't the same, but it looks like kind of similar. And that's where the astral world, it's this gradual transition. It's so amazing. So it's like the backyard kind of looks the same, but then you start to explore a little bit, and all of a sudden you could be in a completely different dimension by the time you get out of that backyard. So it has a funny way of progressing from the familiarity to now I have no clue where I am. I'm in a whole, but there always is that, that progression. When I'm in my room, it looks just like my room. And maybe there's some things that are a little bit different, but it pretty much looks just like my room. But once I start venturing out, things gradually start to get different, more different. Now, there are projections where I don't really encounter any other beings.
That was going to be my question. I want to know, finish your line of thought, but I want to know if you encountered beings and interacted.
That's also where I'm going with it, actually. So there are
Also, we're on
projections.
the same page.
Yeah, right there. So there are projections where I don't encounter any beings. Usually those are darker. What I mean by darker is the concept of day and night in astral projecting is a little bit different in the physical world, I would say, from my experience, because with astral projection, there's no sun, like a physical body necessarily. So if it's daytime, that could be referring to the entire quality of the vibration of the dimension you're in, and not just, oh, it's daytime or nighttime. So if it's nighttime and you're astral projecting, you're usually in a lower type of vibration. Everything kind of looks like empty. You don't know what's around the corner. It's nighttime. You're wandering by yourself in a place that you have no idea where it exists. And if you think your mind plays tricks on you, normally when you're walking around at night and it's late, then believe me, you're going to see a lot of stuff. So those are darker types of astral projections. Some of them are usually it always starts out nighttime, a little bit dark, and then it gets more and more daytime. Sometimes it's right away daytime, and I think that has to do with my mood state and how I am falling asleep. If I'm in a good positive mood, or maybe I'm already in that good vibration, doesn't seem as much nighttime. Just some speculation. I'm not really sure yet, but definitely there's that idea that yeah. So then there's projections where I call on my spirit guides, and about somewhere along the line I started doing this. It was once I started actually leaving my body frequently, but never really knowing what to do next. And I started learning, oh, I can actually call on a spirit guide, and this is when I really started believing in life after death. It was once I had beings start to show up in front of me and look me straight in the eye. Not as you would some kind of figure in your dream where you can't really see the eyes of people in your dreams. It was like there's a being with a consciousness looking at me right now through its eyes. So that's where I really started to believe in life after death. And so I would project out of my body, and I would, with my voice as loud as I can, say, "Spirit guide." I always would do that. It's always the same command. I never change it. It's a spirit guide, as loud as I can. And after about 3 to 4 seconds, usually it's like, it's coming. All of a sudden, I start to feel a vibration again, very much like I do with, the original vibration stage.
Mm-hmm.
But this is like another one. and it's like it's coming. It's like, oh my god, they just showed up. Sometimes it shows up the spirit guide as a white monkey. Sometimes it's another being, and they show up, and I know that they're a spirit guide because I know that they answered this call. But some people might say, well, how do you have that level of discernment? There then could be, so that could then you're getting into complicated territory. I don't neglect that, just because you're calling a spirit guide, it's necessarily your spirit guide that's showing up. There may be tricks involved. Who knows? Anything can happen in the astral realms, and I have had something similar to that happen, but I don't know. There was once a time where I called on a spirit guide, and it had this very interesting necklace, and it looked like it was like a heart beating but it was like glowing like it was a crystal, and it had a skull shape. And so I was like, well, I wonder if that's really my spirit guide, because it seems like a very like malevolent, violent being. So I don't know what was up there.
Just one little point I would make with that is the thing I trust when I'm dealing with either or spirit guide or something maybe negative, it's just like when you're dealing with people in objective reality, you can tell when somebody feels creepy. You can tell when somebody feels good. You can tell by their energy. They don't have to be saying something bad, saying something good. You can tell by the energy of somebody.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's also things like sometimes when I haven't projected yet, I'll know that there are beings standing at the edge of my bed. And some of them are, shadow beings that are dark and negative, but some of them are actually positive and trying to help me get out of my body. So I've had experiences like that where they're trying to wake me up and project. And then I've had beings that are trying to do the exact opposite. They don't want me to project. They want to keep me in my body and like stand on my chest and prevent me from getting out and just make me fearful and at all costs not let me project. So there's definitely, and then there's like gray areas of beings that are just kind of neutral. This past astral projection I had, I left my body. This was around maybe 3 nights ago. This was 3 nights ago. I left my body. I started I started going down this road that looked like I was in Arizona, where there's barely any cars passing by, where you got to hitchhike, to get places. And I remember not seeing any cars at all, and I'm like so like eager to meet any being that comes along, So all of a sudden I see a truck coming by, and I'm like, all right, perfect. Any being, perfect. So I run over to the truck and I start making the hitchhike symbol, like I want to, get hitched. And then I go over, and they open the door. They pull over. They open the door, and this like looked like he was like Mexican, I would say, like a mustache, one of those horn hats as well, and kind of like gets out of the car a little bit and just peeks his head out, and he's like, "You want to hitchhike?" Like he was just like puzzled. Like that's really what you want to do? And then I said, I was like, yeah. Like it was kind of this telepathic kind of communication, but I almost could hear him at the same time. And sometimes it switches between telepathic and voice. It's interesting. And then I said, yeah, I want to hitchhike. And then he's like, you shouldn't ask for random rides around here. Like this area is not good for that. And I was like, oh, interesting. And then he's like kind of like telepathically made me realize that the sun, when it goes down in this area, that's when darker entities come out here. So I don't want to just ask for any ride. So he was almost catching me before the sun went down. That's kind of the dynamic of the astral projection. He was like, I'm like trying to meet any being, and he's like, before the sun goes down, catching me and stopping me in my tracks and saying, hey, like, be careful here. But there have been astral projections. Where you know what I used to do? This is crazy. So I would use a trampoline technique, and I would jump on a trampoline, like those games you play on your iPhone back in the day.
Mhm.
And that would get me to really high realms. So it's interesting. Not only this is I'm really just realizing this right now as I'm speaking, but there are two ways to influence the dimensional quality, and it is by whether it's daytime or nighttime, and whether you are moving in an upwards direction or in a downwards direction. So those two things are really powerful when you're astral projecting. So I remember I would take these bouncy trampolines, and then I would finally get to a spot in like this like floating rock, like it wasn't just like a small floating rock. Like you knew you were in the sky, but there was a lot of land that you were covering. So like it didn't feel like you were just on this one little rock. It felt like you were in some new area that just happens to be in the sky.
Yeah.
And so that area was just, it's beyond just like a sunny day that feels amazing. Like it's the quality of the light in that dimension is so bright that you literally feel like you're, the best thing I can explain it is like, when you were a kid, maybe this is how I relate to it. When I was a kid, my parents would say, "Oh, we're going on this trip," and like I was really excited to go on this trip, but I was the most excited the day before the trip, and that feeling of like the euphoria of like the whole weekend's ahead of you. That whole weekend's ahead of you. That one moment right before it all starts, that's the euphoria you feel, but it's almost like pervasive. Like it doesn't end. It continues because you're like, oh, I'm here. Time isn't linear anymore. I'm in the most amazing place, and I don't have to worry about a biological time as we know it. I don't have to worry about a schedule. I don't have to worry about any of that. I'm in this amazing realm that's completely light, and like it's just crazy. But then there's the opposite. I've been pulled down by negative entities into lower realms where everything's just really dark and kind of creepy. And it's like you walk around and like you don't know what's around the corner. So it's just interesting. Yeah. I've never had anything really malevolent happen because I tend to, during the day, practice, a lot of sort of psychic self-defense, if you might.
Yeah.
If I
So that's awesome. I want to take a step back. I think you were mentioning how, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you said you were living in Boston, and regardless, maybe early on, if you were actually there or not, you were having these early experiences where that would be a starting point in maybe an out of body experience. Like you'd just be there or end up there initially. Is that kind of how you were explaining it? Because reason I'm bringing it up is because I have a lot of times where, I grew up in Pennsylvania, and so a lot of dreams or just actual experiences where I just end up, I kind of have a heightened awareness of being in some part of my house that I grew up in. So I was wondering if that's what you were talking about or no.
Yeah, exactly. It's like I remember the place where I grew up in, so I start out there, even though that's not where I'm currently sleeping. And
Right.
so like I trick myself into thinking, oh, I'm actually asleep here in my old home, and I'm just like, I left. Here I go. It's a regular astral projection. But even though I know, I sometimes I kind of know in the back of my mind too, like, oh, this isn't. I don't actually live here, but
Right.
sometimes I do know. Yeah. Sometimes it's like I kind of forget, which is interesting.
Yeah. Um, so you're talking about these experiences of,
There's a lot
maybe.
of,
Oh, sorry.
no, keep going. Sorry.
Oh, where you maybe are getting away from your physical body. You're, but then you said you have these experiences where you start realizing maybe you've entered a different dimension. And is it really clear to you when you make a shift? Does it seem clear to you of, oh wait, this doesn't seem like I'm on a low plane like that looks familiar of like, your house or your, earth and whatnot? Is it or is it sometimes difficult to notice, okay, hey, I've jumped a couple different dimensions inward or upwards and I'm over here now? I guess, could you talk about going to different dimensions a little more and what
Yeah.
that's like?
Process. Yeah, and how it feels. Yeah. A lot of it is streets, because I used to live on like a suburban street.
Mm-hmm.
So I start to like walk down a street, and then slowly I kind of get lost. I don't know where I am, but it still looks like a suburban street.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of places that have backyard pools. I know it's kind of funny, but like, yeah, just like the 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 feeling of knowing that everything's really sunny, and that I'm free, and I'm like can fly, and that there's just people with like backyard pools and pool parties. It's awesome.
Sounds like it, yeah.
Yeah, and it's just like one time I projected to this place that was like this winding treehouse staircase, and each level was a different hot tub.
Huh. That's
Cool.
nice. That sounds good.
Yeah, so it's pretty interesting. And then another time, one time I astral projected, and this is where I found that astral projection is so much more powerful than I thought. And I saw, this was in high school, I saw somebody from biology class in the astral projection, because I was walking down the street, and I go to this house, and I go into the basement, and there's this little gathering, and I see my friend, who I'm not really that good friends with, but I just know him in my biology class.
Hmm.
And we'll call him, for the sake of the podcast, we'll call him Matt.
Mm-hmm.
I was, I knew, I saw him, and I told him, we're projecting right now. This is incredible. Like, when we wake up, make sure that you give me a sign that this actually happened. And he was like, okay, cool. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I will. And so I wake up after that, and on my way to school on the bus, I had tweeted on Twitter a tweet that said "sick astral projection last night." And back then, everybody on Twitter is like, it's like your whole high school is basically on Twitter.
Yeah.
So, the only person that ended up favoriting that tweet was Matt.
Mm.
Like, we're not really even that good friends. So, so here I am in biology class, and I go over to him, and I'm like, why did you favorite that? And he was like, oh, it just sounded cool. I was like, that's crazy. Like, I literally saw you in the astral projection. That's why I pretty much tweeted that. Well, not really, but I saw you in the astral projection, and then you were in that one.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, oh, that's crazy. Like, he was like freaked out almost. So that's kind of like this idea that there's this sort of I feel like his astral body, when he was telling me, yeah, I will definitely let you know somehow that this is happening, it found a way to do that through Twitter in that way.
Right.
I wasn't conscious of it, but
Right. That's cool.
Yeah.
That's
I
really
had an experience also where there was this kid who was an exchange student from Brazil, where, of course, brujos and all of that culture is very heavy there. So there's a lot of shamanism, etc. So all of a sudden we were hanging out through a mutual friend, and he goes up to me, and at this point in my life, I didn't really tell people that I was practicing this stuff. And he goes up to me and he says, "You're not alone," out of nowhere. And I was like, "How do you know? Like, what are you a sorcerer?" And then he was like, "Yeah." Like, he kind of like gave that look. And I was
Kind of creepy.
yeah. And then he said, "What do you know about sorcery? What do you know about sorcery?" And I was like, "Oh, I know you can like slow down time and stuff." And then he was like, "Yeah, I was in your dream last night." And I was like, "What?" And then I didn't believe him. And all of a sudden, I have this feeling of deja vu. And when you have deja vu, and then you remember your dream last night?
Yeah.
I had that. I had deja vu, and then I remembered my dream last night, and he was in my dream.
Huh.
And so I was, wow, he wasn't kidding. So it was crazy. He started telling me that, like, yeah. So I realized that astral projection, there was this sort of other things can happen. It's not just you're in this isolated dimension. There is this cross conversion between people in the astral world and also people in the physical world.
Right. Yeah, and that's how guides can interact with your dream, or your space. Other entities interacting with your space. So
Exactly.
so one of the questions that Andrew and I like to ask towards where we're getting to wrap things up is do you have any sort of a tip or any sort of a takeaway that you could help out with? I was thinking of like, has a guide that you've spoken with given you something that would be helpful for for anybody that maybe wasn't just as personal for you, but like some good message, some good takeaway that could be shared?
Yeah, absolutely. The main takeaway I would say is realizing that everything that you think you own, including your physical body, you don't really own because it can be taken away from you. You know, somebody can chop your arm off. Somebody can break your car. Your house can get burnt down. But nobody can take your spirit from you.
Right.
And the more we focus and invest our time and energy on the aspect of ourselves that no one can take away from us, the less affected we are when the finite aspect of ourselves is damaged or broken or something goes wrong with it.
Right. And I would add to that the using psychic self-defense. You find out more and more whether it's in the real world, in the objective world, or in your dreams, you're able to protect yourself from anything negative. Uh, I've had plenty of experiences in the objective world of people trying to get me into some sort of argument or whatever, and you can put up a psychic block. You can block that energy exchange. Same thing with the astral. I've, just like you were talking about before, I've tried to call out for a guide or this or that, and maybe an entity came that was not my guide or was maybe not so, great to be around, and I just could block it if I'm in the right energetic space.
Yeah,
So,
that's incredible. Yeah, and the last point I also want to bring up too is, after I had done all that, I created this sort of shamanic practice where people, where I could sort of, where people could practice this stuff um, and have incredible effects um, in terms of reconciling, you know, in one way you're saying blocking the psychic block, but in another way it could also be flipped around to be like mediating, arguments, and like clients of mine telling me that, you know, their sister who she hadn't spoken to in 6 months um, wanted to make up with her because we did some sort of shamanic ceremony where we leave our bodies and we are able to interact with the astral body of that person and sort of make amends with that person. And then it kind of travels itself to the universe itself. And then it's next thing you know, they text them the next day. And that's happened many times. I've also been able to, while I'm not having an astral projection that's from 3 a.m., but just even in like a shamanic journey where it's just that, I call it ethereal projection, because you're using the ether directly without even laying down to go to sleep.
mhm.
Where I've had that experience of being able to see something about somebody that is spot on point with their life many, many times with many, many, clients, after with their permission, of course, too. And that's, giving me a lot of insight into, information is always traveling between us, just like the internet. We can't see it, but there is the internet of that connected energy that allows people to have greater depth of communication, and greater understanding. And if we tap into that more, we'll have greater understanding of each other and proceed to, like, sort of better enlightenment collectively.
So do you want to plug your stuff and give people your information?
Oh yeah, so you can just Google search. You can just Google search shamanic journey, astral travel, Santa Monica, and it should come up as a meetup group. So shamanic journey, astral travel, Santa Monica, and it'll say this group is interested for anyone, and then yeah, you'll see it.
Cool.
Cool.
Andrew, last thoughts?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for coming on and just speaking on this topic, and it's been fun to hear. But I find it fascinating hearing people's stories and experiences out of the body, or just anything related to this. So it's been fun hearing about your personal experiences. So I appreciate you coming on.
This has been great, you guys. Honestly, and I'm so happy to do it again in the future.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
Always love to talk about this stuff, and help as many people as I can who are interested in it, know more about it, and learn more about it. So yeah, it's just thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we'll talk
absolutely.
more, man. We'll text and we'll keep up and figure something out for something else.
All right, sounds good.
Cool.
Yeah,
Cool.
all right.
Well, yeah.
All right.
Thanks for being on here with us, sharing experiences. And everyone, this is another episode of Surf the Astral. Feel free to subscribe and follow to us, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.